Welcome. This is the first in a new monthly video series on books. At the end of each month, I'm just gonna recap the books I read that month. Some I won't have a lot to say on, some I might have a lot to say on, but allows me to kind of talk on all these different topics. This month, it's about half and half fiction and nonfiction. I think especially during all the stuff going on these days, I'll be leaning more into fiction. But yeah, very excited to bring these to you. I love just talking about books more, and then even just like right after you read them, there's times where I want to almost just like write a book report, and got some on my computer that will go nowhere, but just like, yeah, I want to dig into them a little bit more. I want to read with more intent, and so yeah, I'm hoping that this series can not only be beneficial for me, but hopefully someone else out there will enjoy it a little bit. So yeah, first book I read in March was Farm City by Novella Carpenter. I picked this up at Open Books in Chicago, and so that's my favorite Chicago bookstore. So this book was much more about animals than I anticipated, which was kind of nice, just because I love agriculture, but I'm not much of a green thumb myself. And then also just living in Peoria, Illinois, like your crops are pretty much done in October, and then so November-ish, but like unless you go with a big setup or something, pretty much it's not a year-round thing. And so I've done it before. I've had a little pepper patch, I've had a big garden at some points, and just haven't really gone forward with it. So it was kind of nice to not just have like, this is how easy it is, look, you could do it too, when I'm just like, I don't want to. So yeah, it was just more about having a farm in a city, and that just concept alone was very interesting, and it had a lot of different characters in it from the neighborhood. So she was in Oakland, and it was just neat. It was a lot of people's, their main tether to agriculture in her neighborhood, and so it was cool to see just a kid seeing chickens for their first time or something, and it's just important stuff, honestly. And so I didn't like glean a lot from it, whereas like, oh, she described exactly how to do that, I'm gonna do that same thing here, just because a lot of it on my lifestyle is not lining up. But I learned a ton from this book. I loved it. Yeah, it was a really neat read. Just, I don't know, it kind of, in the heart of all the new things going on in our society, where I see California, San Francisco area pushing out a lot of that, this was nice to just see like a little oasis in that of nature. And yeah, I was really enjoyed the book more than I thought I was going to once I got like into it, and was like, oh, okay, so this is a lot about raising animals, which obviously being vegan, not my jam, but a couple years ago, I probably would have just straight up just been like, I'm not into it. Where now I'm more interested in animals' role in agriculture. I know that they are part of a balanced farm in my eyes, and so this was neat to see. Good book. It's good to have around to reference. And then if anyone was like seriously getting into stuff where they're like, I'm putting big beds in the backyard, I'm trying, like this season we're planting this, that, and the other, like I'd probably loan them this book. And just, like, there might be one thing in there that's worth reading, but also kind of helps normalizing this, where I think that was something that she was dealing with, was just everyone was like, why are you doing this in Oakland? Why don't you go out to the country? And she's like, because I want to live in a neighborhood, I want to live around people, but I also want to grow food. So, and I think it's a very human plight, and I liked it. She also was just very good with her words. It kind of read like blog entries almost, and I like that. Yeah, really smooth read. Next book was one that just caught me off guard. I usually am a little leery if I just find a big book at a store that I've never seen before. Usually if it's something like over 400 pages, that's something I gotta do a little research in, make sure I'm barking up the right tree here. But yeah, this Can't Stop, Won't Stop by Jeff Chang. This is, so you can see there, history of the hip-hop generation. So I think they say it like that because it's not, it kind of absolves them of like, well, you didn't touch on this, you didn't touch on that. It's like, it's not a biography of hip-hop. It's the culture. It's the socioeconomic factors that led to this art exploding. And so a lot of it, it went back to like Jamaica during the Cold War. It went into a lot of things that were going on with the housing projects in New York and the way those were being structured or taken down and moved and things like that, where you just see all these factors lining up to like, yeah, something was gonna happen. You're pushing too many people in a tough spot. There's gonna be a bounce back. And in this generation, it was hip hop, because that encapsulated so many things. And when I say hip hop, I'm not just talking about rap CDs. Like the fact that it had so many different types of dance incorporated with it, along with graffiti, along with spoken word poetry and beats and new types of DJing coming about, people discovering breaks, things like this, all swelling up at once, was just like such a trifecta is not even the right word, just everything coming together. It was so many things all at once. And so it was cool to see, because I think if the people who were there at that time probably couldn't have understood that, like, oh, this is going to be an enormous thing. And 2020, most songs on the like hot like hits or whatever probably a rap, you know. And like, so it's neat to see how far something can come in such a short amount of time, really, like 30-ish years. Like, I mean, there were things that impacted it prior to that, but really like 40 years, I'd say. I'm off, but yeah, it was a really good book. And there's sometimes where we read like hip-hop books and they're just so straightforward, or it's like there's obvious parts of the culture that it's like they can't not write about it, where in this, Jeff Chang didn't write about some of the obvious stuff, and it makes me want to read his other books. He has a book on race that I'm curious about. I got enough books on hand right now. I'm trying to pace my ordering. I almost ordered it right away, but it's like, all right, hold on. But yeah, just I think I learned more about the world and that than I anticipated. Where even if someone's like, I am not real interested in hip hop specifically, but like politics or just youth culture, like just we look at kind of what's going on with Trump and everything, and this is, you know, maybe some people's like first real president where they're like active in it, seeing what's going on, seeing votes and saying like, I wish that went the other way, and knowing that like impacted them. It's pretty clear that in this era there would be a lot of revolt, that there would be a lot of art coming out that is in response to something else. And so looking back through this lens onto this era, you just see everything that was happening, and it just makes me grateful. It just makes me so glad that all that could have been going on and so much beauty emerged from it, so much lasting art. And that's what has paved the way for everything now. Like, it encapsulated so much in this book. I feel like I could talk on that book for 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep this video in general to like 30-ish minutes, and I'm at 8 so far, so we'll see. But yeah, moving right into the next one. Author you will see on here, again, Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorites. This is Wampeters, Foma, and Grandfalloons. So he makes up words sometimes, and sometimes we'll put those into the title of the book. This one was not a novel. It said it was a collection of like essays and opinions, which was I don't really know where the opinions thing came from, because it was a lot of like commencement speeches and interviews and some short stories and stuff like that. So just smaller scattered writings compiled, but actually done when he was in an era of like putting stuff out, versus like a posthumous like, what scraps can we find? Like I have a little Salinger thing that's called 3 stories, like how he did 9 stories. And someone definitely just found 3 stories that got printed in magazines a while ago, put them into one thing with Salinger's name on it, and started selling it. I bought it because I'm a Salinger fan, but it doesn't feel quite the same. And then there's a lot of like Vonnegut stuff that came out like after 2000, where there's a lot of like compilations and stuff, and that's where I've seen some like repeats and stuff, like this short story here and here, this interview here and here. So this one was all fresh, and just the first couple I didn't really get into it, and then in the midway I was like, some of these short stories was like, honestly, if someone was like, what is Kurt Vonnegut like, some of those short stories would be like spitting image perfect. You know, like some of the full novels are definitely like, yeah, if I could hand you that, that's what I'd give you. But some people aren't gonna say like, I'm curious, give me 200 pages. Like sometimes here's 8 pages, and see if you like this guy's talking. Oh my God, no, I don't like my talking. All right, so overall, not my favorite Kurt Vonnegut that I've read, but not my least favorite either. Not my least favorite within short story collections, so that's saying something. Outside of his novels, Bagumbo Snuffbox is kind of my number one, but this is pretty good. Yeah, a lot of good gems in there. Just a lot of weird stuff. There's a couple in there that I think if I weren't already a Vonnegut fan, I'd just be like, what is this? Like, why are these pages even in this book? But being a Vonnegut fan, I'll take every word, every crumb I can get. So yeah, I liked it. Also, I plan to read all of Kurt Vonnegut's books in my life, but I'm sort of pacing my purchasing on them by looking for the old weird covers. So like, I'm sure you can order this book on Amazon, and it probably has those bright, shiny new covers that are all just, you know, like one color and then one line drawing that are his. They're everywhere. I think all his books, or all his novels at least, are still in print, but it just doesn't excite me to get the brand new ones and just be like, here, my perfect bookshelf. Like, I want all the weird ones, and like, oh, they only did a small run of that cover, like that type of stuff. So I saw this at, I think also at Open Books in Chicago, and yeah, couldn't pass it up. I had never heard of it before, honestly, which was kind of neat. Yeah, it's solid. Frederick Bachman coming in at number 4 here. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. I read that backwards off the screen because the title was too long to remember. So he is a fantastic fiction writer, and as this quarantine stuff was setting in, I was starting to think like, oh man, my stack of unread books is predominantly nonfiction right now. Probably need to start tipping those scales back because life. And Frederick Bachman is just like such a classic fiction writer to me, where it's just like you create the worlds very well, you create well-rounded characters. It's a language I just like being in, and it's translated from Swedish, and I feel like a tip of the hat goes to the translator on that. I don't imagine he writes in like a simplistic way with translation in mind. I don't think anyone would write that way, maybe, but yeah, I feel like any book that gets translated, as much credit almost goes to the translator, so respect to that person. Thought maybe their name would be on the front. It's not. Shout out to that person, though. But I got into Frederick Bachman off a sports book, which was the only sports book I've ever read, besides the sequel to that sports book. So Beartown was the first Frederick Bachman that I read, and it was awesome. If anyone handed me a sports book, like, seriously, Joe, this one's good, I'd probably be like, I can guess how it ends, or some, you know, like sports movies or anything. I'm just not super into it. Not a sports guy, but yeah, it's just such good writing. It's like the thing, like the last book I read of his, Britt Marie was here. If someone described that character and then that book, I would just be like, you've described the type of things I don't want to read about pretty clearly. That's not a type of person I want to read about. That's not anything I'm real into. And whoa, that book was so good. So I was delighted that when reading this book, which I'm trying not to give anything away in these books. I always feel like even in just like the 2-sentence like plot summary, you can learn way too much about a book and just be like, well, now I've had 80 pages expecting this one thing to happen. And so I'm not going to tell you a lot about like the innards of them too much, but I will tell you that Britt Marie, the character from the aforementioned book, is in this book. This came out before, so I wish I had read them in the other order. Not that there's a lot of like continuity in the stories, but still just to hear like, or see that name written there, like, and Britt Marie came around the corner, it's like, oh, awesome. Like, Kurt Vonnegut actually does that quite a bit with characters, where like Kilgore Trout has been in a lot of them. He had the dog that was in Galapagos, that was in Sirens of the Titan, where in this, Britt Marie, same character, same kind of position in the group, but yeah, it was so neat to see, and it just like kind of deepened my web of his world. But yeah, maybe want to read Britt Marie was here again, because I just almost want to see if there's any like acknowledgments or anything back to this that I maybe would have missed reading that. But yeah, super good read. Basically, like, the general plot of it is a grandmother leaves her granddaughter like a scavenger hunt of things to do, but it's basically like people to meet. And so she just goes around meeting people. It's pretty awesome. Kind of reminded me of Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, that Jonathan Safran Foer book / movie. But yeah, really good. His stuff gets a little sentimental, which I'm very okay with. I'm an emotional guy. So yeah, there are those occasional lines in any Frederick Bachman book I've read that, if you picked them apart, could look kind of corny. And I will say, particularly in the sports book, yeah, there's some of those in there, but they're so good. They're so nice sometimes. So, like, yeah, maybe that one last sentence at the end of the paragraph was pretty obvious, but it hits. So I like his stuff. Next one, probably book I will recommend the least out of this stack. Be pretty specific people that I would recommend this to. Drugs in the Brain by Solomon Snyder. So I am into both of those things. I liked reading about both of them, and I was like, hey, one book, 2 subjects, let's do it. Except for the fact that since 1986, this book's publication, a lot has happened. A lot has changed, a lot of understanding, a lot of books have been written, and this didn't hold up so well. So there is a lot of information in here I would like to cycle back to or keep on hand as like a reference if I'm writing about any of these substances, or just the brain and the way that things happen. There's a lot of interesting graphs and stuff in it. But there is a lot of like little molecular charts, and yeah, there were some pretty good graphs, things like that, where you get to learn a little bit. I was a horrible student in school, especially science, and so if I feel that part of me that wants to, like, I want to learn, like, do it, strike while the iron's hot, like, because that's apparently against my DNA in some way, but I think a lot of that has changed. So, read this book. It's pretty much not a book that would be out at, like, a normal bookstore. I think it's more from, like a medical library, or, like, at a university library or something like that. Good information in it. Like I said, just a little bit dated, but there's not just mountainous amount of books on these subjects, so sometimes as you just keep working through some of them, you can find ones that, like, looking at that book, I didn't think, like, that's gonna be my favorite book. I just thought, like, it's on subjects I like, and I'll read it and then have it around. So that's about as good as it was. Followed that up with a good novel from Paulo Coelho, author of The Alchemist. This was The Witch of Portobello. Basically, as you know, back in the day, women who were doing anything kind of out of the usual, anything kind of semi-spiritual, artistic, could get called a witch pretty quick. And once that was on you, it was a hard stamp to remove. So this is just kind of like chronicling one woman who was just tapping into different energies, just doing different stuff. She didn't have a cauldron and a broom, or casting hexes or anything mean, anything bad or creepy, just kind of a spiritual lady. And I wanted to read this book after that Drugs in the Brain book, because I was like, I just want a novel. Like, and I know that morning I had like 2, maybe even 3 hour chunk where I was like, just fall into a book, go deep on that. And I was a little disappointed in the format of this, just because of where I was at, and that this was all like letters, or like someone reporting on her, and it was just kind of hard to get into a flow on, because it was maybe like 8 different people that would be talking about her, like 4 or 5 of them consistently, like different letters, and I don't know, I just had a hard time getting into it. But then, like, midway, excuse me, I remember I liked it a lot more, and I'd even said to my roommate when I started, it's like, this might be the first Paulo Coelho book I kind of pick up and put back down. And then, like, 50, 60 pages later, I'm like, oh, okay, no, I get it, totally. So, and I like the way they did that, because it's not just like, it makes it feel realer. It's not a real person, but like, he had a book, The Spy, where it was just like letters about this one woman, and it actually was a very true scenario, it was a neat way to learn about it without it just being like total fiction. or like, what's that called? Like the journalistic fiction, whatever In Cold Blood was that Capote did, or like Mailer had the one on Picasso where it was like, we assumed these are what the conversations would be like. We didn't have the exact, but we're putting a little bit of fiction to make a story out of this. This is kind of what it felt like without having to do, I don't know, it just didn't seem like super phony, but like, yeah, it was a good way to tell this story, is what I will say. But in the ranks of Paulo Coelho books, I think this is like the 16th or something that I've read, probably on the lower half. We're not talking about like The Pilgrimage, The Valkyries, The Alchemist, not really at that level. Still a really good book. I still really just like his writing style, and I don't know if you've read things that I've written. I wrote those essays on alcohol, or like ones about like what Mother's Day means to me, and a lot of those I touch on kind of religion and kind of where I'm at with that. I like that Paulo Coelho can talk about spiritual aspects of life without it being subscribed to a religion. If you have to talk with those parameters, it can kind of be tricky, and so he does a really good job of like discussing those energies, letting their power be, and then moving on. And it's not like this big, well, how would you define that? It's just kind of like, yeah, there's more to life. Moving on. And so it's a good book, but if it was someone who's like, I've never read Paulo Coelho, I would say, don't start with this. Yeah. Maybe the most exciting book of the month came from Lit on Fire, The Bear, by Andrew Krivak. And this little book knocked me back. It was so good. And I knew it was going to be because Jessica wrote a really nice review of it, the owner of Lit on Fire. She is doing just more and more innovative stuff these days, from getting new books to then like reviews of them. She has an online shop up, which if you want to buy any of these books, do it through Lit on Fire. Please do not buy any of these through Amazon. There is no need to, when Lit on Fire has an online store where you can get everything, any book you want, and Lit on Fire is helped out through that. So check them out. The reason I read, the reason I'm doing any of this reviews, reading, like, all that goes back to Lit on Fire. So all props to her. Jessica, if you're watching this, you're an awesome person. Her review of The Bear, along with the cover, and kind of the title, I guess, too, all really pulled me in. And I wouldn't say it's a heavy book. It's not like it's sad, but it's got a lot to it. It's got a lot of substance. When I bought it, Jessica said something to the effect of like, I just finished that and it gave me a book hangover. And I was like, what? And then, so she says sometimes there's like, times you read a book and it's like, ooh, I can't like close that and like pick up another, like, I gotta sit with that. That's gotta marinate a little bit. And it's like, that sounds good. And she also did, she's like, I know you're a vegan. There's some animal stuff in this that might be tough to read. And I was like, thank you for the heads up on that. Good to know. Still gonna read it. And it wasn't too gnarly. Factory farming books are way worse. So yeah, people foraging for their own food. Like, I got nothing wrong with that. You do what you gotta do. This basically just follows like one girl out in the forest. I really won't tell you much of the plot, but what I liked about it is that they're in the wilderness the whole time, and then there's never any other relation given. So it's not like on the northwest coast or something like, or 15 miles over would be Portland, or like it doesn't tell you anything about where it is. To my knowledge, I don't think it said anything. So it was just like out in the woods, out in caves. It didn't tell you what year it was. So, they weren't out there using cell phones. Surprise, surprise, but like, don't even know if that would have been a thing. This could have been meant to be set in 1920 and it would be no different, than now. And that's what I really liked about it, because it just kind of brought you back to the, like, just humanity stuff that sort of transcends eras and is just sort of like, just the way they describe, like, getting a fire going and, like, little things where it's just like, I've been there. I've felt that where, like, I'm trying to, like, oh, there. And, like, I don't know. There's just some very primal parts of this book that I think would resonate with anyone. It's not a more masculine book because it's about the subjects that it's on. It's mostly following a girl. And it is something that I just think anyone, like man, woman, child type thing, would enjoy. Yeah, there's so much good stuff in it. Just looking at constellations, and it makes you think of like how much you appreciate seeing the stars if you're in an area that has a lot of light pollution. And then just sort of, I don't know, it makes me think a lot about just sort of where we're at now. Obviously in this book, they're dealing with a lot of struggles just about where they are in society, what they have access to, their own tools, and just like sitting on your comfy couch next to your refrigerator full of food, and it's like, I'm living the good life. But tomorrow I have to go to a job I don't like at all, and all that type of stuff. So it's like, yeah, I don't think either of us is right. It's just very different, and it was just kind of neat to see different style. But yeah, I guess he has other books that seem to be getting similar levels of praise, and I definitely want to read more by him. This was a book that kind of like with Old Man in the Sea. Right when I started that, also just, if you know that book, it's not a big book, but I just knew like I'm gonna read it in a straight shot. Like I don't want to read half and then I'll pick up the other half like probably tomorrow. Like I read it all through on a Sunday. I split it into two. There's a pretty good halfway point without there being like a typed out like part 1, part 2 thing, but just kind of a big turning point in the book. And yeah, wonderful writing. Just the type of like words you just want to keep sinking into, or like just sentence after sentence, just being like, damn, like there's not one word too many, there's not one word too little. It's just perfect. So I think that book is like 200 pages in it. It's big spacing, small pages. It's a pretty easy one to get your arms around. And so like I would recommend that if any friends out there like, I kind of want to get into reading or something, or like, that's a really good book to kind of get your wheels turning, I think. Yeah, cannot recommend that enough. Thank you to Jessica for posting about it at Lit on Fire, and for stocking in terms of like the new books that she brings in. She's stocking great stuff. She's curating a very good array in there. And yeah, always grateful to her and Lit on Fire. If I subtracted all the books I've read in the last couple of years that are all because of her, if I subtract that all from my head, I'm a different person, like by a lot. So yeah. Next one was one I kind of debated reading, but went for it. Animalkind. So this is written by Ingrid Newkirk, and so she is the founder of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I am vegan, have been for some years now, and I will be honest, the animal side of it was not the driving factor in me becoming vegan. It's a big one, and it's a big part of like the pie chart of my reasoning, but it's not the biggest piece, so that's why I'm also not like the most like adamant vocal. Those tend to be the animal ones. I just want people to be happier, I think is my big general thing, or the earth to be happier. But I read this after seeing an interview that she did, and she's just so well spoken, and someone who's been in it for decades. They have so much information to share, and so I was really excited to read this book and pleasantly surprised by just everything about it. It's 2 parts, which almost feel like 2 different books. And I should say it's co-written by a guy named Gene Stone, who has done other like writing or like ghost writing and other books. So he's done a lot with Forks Over Knives and other like Living the Farm Sanctuary Life, and that's Gene Bauer's book. And then a lot of other like real prominent things, I think, where the people are like, I'm super passionate, I'm doing this. Where he's like, all right, I also am a writer, so we can condense that, put it with some good writing, and now it'll be a good package. So he, I think, definitely deserves major tip of the hat for making this book so absorbable, I would say. I think I'm vegan and I don't want to read about factory farm shit. Like I've read books, I've seen the documentaries, I've seen the footage that you'll never forget. Needed it all to get to where I am today, for sure. Ongoing, I don't really seek it out. I have no need to watch animals get mutilated in a factory farm so that tonight I won't eat animals, because I'm done with it. Like, I'm over that hump. But So that's kind of what I thought this book was going to be, and I was just like, I don't want to read, like, what's the point? Like, but it was way different than I thought. So the first half is basically just like amazing stuff animals do, broken into, I believe, 3 sections: movement, communication, and love, I think. And so the first one of movement, just like the big one is like migratory patterns of birds, and just things that animals are able to do instinctively, or birds that they do their whole flight like hundreds and hundreds of miles without stopping for food, and things like that, where it's like, how are you able to do this? Or like, you're just born with that communication in your head. And so there's just some really astounding stuff in that. And it doesn't narrow in on just the species that are commonly eaten, which is nice, because then it doesn't start off as so much of like, this is why you should stop, this is why you should stop. It's just like, hey, aren't animals crazy? And it's like, yeah, they are. So it was a very easy ground to start off on, just common ground. I think anyone would read some of those stories and just be like, whoa, our planet's wild. And it's just kind of happy. It's just good. It's awesome. So then the second half gets into more about animals' role in our marketplace and in our agriculture and our food. And so this was the most practical book on this I've ever read, because I think it's tough when it all relates to very real world things, like real brands, real people, and so you don't want to step on toes or say anything bad, but like they do a very good job on like makeup of saying like, these are brands who have said they will no longer test on animals. And then there's some who are like, these are doing okay on it. These are the ones who still do it and actually on the side like spend money supporting it, and are really not the good ones. So it's like, all right, if I'm just going to buy a random thing of conditioner, I'd rather it be the one who isn't like throwing money at gnarly animal tests. And so it made it very easy to be like, oh, I could do this one little shift. It's not go 100% plant-based, never eat meat again. It's like, man, maybe those shoes you're buying, what if there's another company that's got some pretty cool ones too, but it doesn't have ground up animal bones in it? Like, that's awesome. So a lot of real good practical stuff in there. I will, without getting it, like, I could rattle off a lot of the gruesome stuff in there, and it's eye-opening. But the one I will leave you with that was the most surprising to me, I didn't know this at all when I read this, was that basically like meat or leather that comes from other countries isn't necessarily always going to be cow. So like in America, if we see leather, we assume it's that, though even here it can be other things. But in China, dogs are used for leather a lot. And so that if you do have like leather garments, but it says made in China, might be dog. That was just insane to see. But yeah. And it's not that, yeah, I could go into a whole thing, like, yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's certain countries are worse than other countries. It's just a weird thing to do. There's just a lot of weird animal stuff that goes on. In my day job is interior design and stuff, and I see like leather's still a very big material, and seeing like whole couches in it, and seeing people like, that's what I want someday. I'm just like, that's some Hannibal Lecter shit. Like, that's skin. It's just a skin couch. And so I think as time goes on and we have a little more hindsight and we'll see some of these practices that were going on, I'll just be a little clear, like, yeah, probably could have done that without the animals, because we have access to unlimited amounts of like materials and other things to make new things out of. So much like we're seeing in food, going plant-based, I think just materials where we're like, yeah, using animals for it. They're just material, like, it's a living thing. If you're taking their skin off while they're alive, you should probably feel remorse. And so I think we'll have businesses start to do better. And by doing that, as consumers, we won't be putting a person in that position. it's someone's job to do all of these things day by day. And that's nasty. You don't, like, mentally, who could go in for 40 hours a week just doing that type of stuff? So by purchasing these things, we kind of put people in those positions, which is not quite fair. And so this book really cast a good light on that. And it didn't do it in a way that incited guilt at all, which is really difficult to do in these. Another book, if you're kind of into what I'm saying here, would be Eating Animals by Jonathan Foer. It was just a really objective view of just like, I just want to learn about where meat comes from because I'm about to have a kid and I don't know. I was a vegetarian in college and I sometimes am, sometimes not. I don't know. And I just want to look at it. And it was a really good objective view of it. And that helped me a lot because I think it's easy to lean on the guilt side of it. It's so easy to lay that argument on someone. But that's not how you make change. I wouldn't have made that change. When I was getting a plant-based, if someone just came at me with like things to make me guilty to change, not a fucking chance. That does not stick with me. I'll remember it. I'll feel bad for a while, but that's not how you grow. And this would be a very good tool for someone who is just want to make their purchases a little less involved in industries that deal in cruelty, and then supporting the businesses who are paving the new way. So I learned a lot from that book. Yeah, I was really, really glad that interview crossed my pathway and for whatever reason dug into it, because now, yeah, everything about that book, money spent on it, supporting her, and like now looking into PETA a little bit more. Like I'd always written PETA off as just like they dump blood on people that wear fur and stuff, and now I look into fur and it's like, props. Do that. Do it more. So, yeah. One more book for the month. And it might have been my favorite book. I literally just bought it like 10 days ago and had never heard of it. And Rage is Back by Adam Mansbach. So, after Can't Stop, Won't Stop, definitely spiked interest in graffiti. I'd always been into like street art and stuff, but basically historically only had the depth to like Shepard Fairey and Banksy type stuff. So pretty much like every guy my age, like I love street art. Name 2 or 3 and maybe saw Exit Through the Gift Shop. But yeah, so this is taking it back to like the straight up like illegal days, bombing train cars. This is basically like 2 generations working together. It's all fiction. It's playing off of like late 80s and then in like 2005-ish times. But amazing story, honestly. I feel like I can't even talk about it without giving it all away. But yeah, it just really, really surprised me, and it was so well understood. I think it's something that like a lot of people would like to write this book, but if you didn't live it, if you haven't been in there, known people not only know the lingo, but just everything. Like, it's like if someone who's never been to music festivals wanted to write a book about music festivals, like all the little things you hear and see, like you're missing it. And so like this was very well researched or very well lived. And so he's also a very popular writer for kids books, I guess. I went to literally like the moment I finished this, started looking him up to find more books by him. And then I was like, oh, if I have a kid, that'd be great. His big one is Go the Fuck to Sleep, which has a cover, if I remember, is kind of like Goodnight Moon, like classic kids book. But yeah, this was fantastic. I saw it at Book Nook in Peoria, like one day before they closed for the quarantine stuff. And so I literally don't remember how this ended up in my hands, because like in a rack of books, just seeing that I don't know why I grabbed that out, but I did. Unless that was out, but I don't think it was, because like, yeah, I feel like I just saw that and then I opened it up or got to the front. It's like, oh, graffiti. So yeah, you ever in a bookstore and something just tells you like, what is this? Like, it's the reason I go to them. Like, same reason shopping old vinyl records. Like, you could order any records you want online. But if you go thumbing through some crates, you're gonna find the weird shit. So, found this and blazed through it. Incredible. This is a book I definitely want to be putting into some friends' hands. Friends who are sort of like on the cusp of reading, kind of like with The Bear, where this is culturally just like, I think there's a lot of people who would dig this type of stuff. And I don't know, again, learned a lot from that. But yeah, it was just a really enjoyable book to read, and I think one of the main reasons is that like it really delivered on the ending, and that's something that like I think can have so much pressure on it that it can be hard to live up to. So sometimes it can be like set aside throughout the book, or not built up and built up and built up, you know? It's like if you watch the Harry Potter, I haven't read the Harry Potter books, but if you watch the movies, and I know that's like blasphemy, but you knew that last one was going to be epic. Like you just knew big things were coming. And that's what this was. And I was hoping as I got to where I was like, all right, you know, 80, 70 pages left, it's like, time to step up to the plate here. It's either going to really, really happen or something isn't. Like, but it delivered, and it was so good and so big, and just, yeah. You just wanted to be in there ripping it up with them. So I love that book. In terms, like, this, all right, so, yeah. Favorite book of the month. This is, all right, favorite story, favorite message, favorite writing. If you can understand kind of the breakdown there. Yeah, I wouldn't say Rage is Back is something where like I would hand it to my English teacher and be like, I just read this. And be like, I'm sure you did, yeah. But The Bear was really like, wow. Like, those words, yeah, like where I'm just like awestruck by it, just because it's so simple in a way that it's like when you have a really good salad that's like 4 ingredients that are just normal things, but it's like, what the fuck did you do? They're so good. Like, where did you get these? Like, so that's kind of where that one was. And then just Animalkind, just on, I don't know, revitalizing an old fire, sort of, like where when I got into it, I was into veganism and all that type of stuff. I was very much like, shout it from the rooftops, like, I want to let you know everything. Definitely eased off of that, but that's sort of like, I don't know, got me going again. So, yeah. Yeah. Any of these 3 books, highly, highly, highly recommend. The other ones, they were good. This is probably if you're into that type of culture, gotta do it. This is very good, but Frederick Bachman is good, is what I will say there. Yeah, we're gonna start with Frederick Bachman. Either do Brett Marie Was Here or Beartown. So pretty good month, I will say. I am ready for more reading as we deal with these quarantine times, and then I also kind of like looking at the footage on this, start to put together a little bit more structure for this. I do just want to do them in order of the way I read them, because I feel like it tells a little bit of a narrative of like, yeah, that was a really dense nonfiction, and then I went to a fiction and back and forth. But like, I guess I'm doing these more just so you can see kind of books that are around and just, I don't know, learn a little bit. But I am looking for any insights here. What is something that you would like to see in this mix? My plan is to try to keep a notepad around me when I'm reading a little bit more and have like one good quote from each book, or like maybe one question I can have to answer for each book. But yeah, if there's something you would like to know in here, let me know. If you watch this whole thing, please let me know that. You're incredible. Thank you so much. I'm hoping to do these every month, and I'm not gonna rush to try to make them a 10-minute clickable, like shareable thing. I just want to talk about books. So hope you like this. Hope someone out there likes this. If you skimmed it and just made it to the end, appreciate that too. But yeah, hopefully one of these a month. Thank you very much.